In the book, I tell the story of Cloudflare. So Cloudflare on its surface is a very humble company. When they started out, it was just a firewall in the cloud. And although the founders were MBAs, they did not like modern, trendy consulting speak either. And they wouldn't allow anyone to say that the company had a mission or values. They just hated that kind of language. If you said, "What's the mission statement?" They'd smack you in the face and be like, "We're just a cloud. We're just making a firewall in the cloud. So get wrecked. You know what are you talking about?" But over time, they were having lunch a couple years in. Although the company had no mission statement, it actually had a very well-defined mission. And although it had no cultural values on the wall, it actually did reflect a very particular ethos. They found this out the hard way when there was a series of democracy protests. I can't remember in what country. And they were being suppressed. Basically, the websites for these democracy protesters were being attacked by sovereign governments. Nation state actors were trying to take this thing down because they found it threatening to their prerogatives. And these protesters were reaching out to tech companies for help. And they'd reached out to all the big Silicon Valley companies that you would imagine had been turned down. And Cloudflare was like, why are we the ones who have to do this? Like, seriously, we're like a tiny startup and we're the ones going to bat. We're going up against like nation state hackers to defend democracy. But all these big companies had become total cowards and they wouldn't do it. So they did. So they did stuff like that, even though these customers were like on the free tier, paying them no money. There was like no upside, all downside of having to like deal with this incredibly expensive denial of service attack. Anyway, it was the right thing to do. So they did it. So there was a kind of company where they made those kind of principled decisions just because. But they had no formal guide for it. They just did it. It was an emergent property of the organization itself. Anyway, a couple of years in, they're having lunch one day. And one of the engineers says, "You know why I like working here? I feel like this is the first place I've ever worked where we're really working to make a better internet." And everyone's like, "Yeah, make a better internet. That's why I'm here too." Everyone's like, "Make a better internet." Oh, that sounds cool. Someone asked Matthew Prince, "Is that our mission statement?" He's like, "No, stop that. We don't have a mission statement, just a firewall in the cloud." But in the company, the phrase "make a better internet," circulated and circulated. And eventually his employees had to convince him, no, it's not our mission statement. It's our mission. This is our purpose. This is why we're here and why we exist. So they adopted it formally. And in fact, later, they even codified their values, the first of which is actually be principled. So this is going along one day. Everything's going fine. The company's growing. Now, the thing you got to understand this story, and it's very important to understand this little detail. At the time, and I'm going to tell you this story, Cloudflare was a freemium product, meaning most customers got the whole suite of services for free, but the paid customers, a certain number of features were behind the paywall. And when you make a freemium product, it's very important that there's a logic to which features are in which category that customers perceive as fair. So generally speaking, if something costs you money, you put it in the paid tier. Customers understand if it's expensive for you, then you have to pay for it. That's only fair, right? So that's how it was. Their number one most important feature in the paid tier was SSL encryption, web encryption. Now today, this part's kind of hard to understand for people coming up on the web today. Today, every website is encrypted on the web by default. It's considered completely normal. But in those days, it was rare. And the story I'm about to tell you is part of the reason why we all have this expectation that we should enjoy the privacy powered by encryption naturally. So Matthew Prince, again, is chatting with one of his engineers, like a young engineer, not someone important in the hierarchy of things. And the engineer asks him this question. He says, "Boss, isn't our mission to make a better internet?" "Uh-huh." "Well, isn't an encrypted internet a better internet?" "Sure." "Well, wouldn't it be better for the whole internet if more people had encryption?" "Sure." "So I'm with you so far." "Well, then why do we charge people for encryption? Shouldn't we give it away for free?" Now, most people hearing this story are just like tearing their hair out. Like, come on. You're just like, this is like business is rife with people like this. Who are just like, let's give our product away for free for no reason. And your job as a manager and as a leader to be like, shut up. In the nicest possible way. "Thank you for your buy-in. Appreciate your input, but I need to redirect you. Remember, we have a corporate strategy. This is how we make money. Our valuation is power. There's no margin, no mission, blah, 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 blah." But Matthew didn't do any of that. He told me later, he was like, once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Like the logic of that statement was completely right. And so he said, "Okay, let's figure it out." And his whole team was like, "What? What do you mean figure it out?" It's like, "Yeah, well, we can't just give it away for free. We would bankrupt the company. We still have to keep our runway intact. So let's find a way to drive the cost of giving this away down so that we can afford to do it." And they worked their butts off. They spent a huge amount of time. They had to rewrite the technology to make it more affordable to operate. They had to do these really complicated biz dev negotiations with the certificate authorities to buy the certificates for cheap. Anyway, it was not trivial work. And as they got closer and closer to the moment of releasing it, a conventional company would have had so many off-ramps to bail out of the story. They could easily have been like, "This is too hard. Why are we doing this extra work? No one's asking us for this. In fact, this is going to make us less money. So why are we doing it? They could have, at a later stage, been like, wait a minute, now that it's working, we don't have to give this away for free. We could just pocket all these savings and our margins would go way up. Why not just have, aren't higher margins better? Why not? When they got to the point of releasing it, they had to tell their board, hey, we're going to do this. The board was like, well, are you worried that conversion rates might go down? They're like, oh yeah, they probably will. But we're going to do it anyway. They did the experiment. They released it to great fanfare, got a lot of good press out of it. And in fact, their conversion rate, like the more they advertised it, the more their conversion rates went down because people were like, oh, great, I don't have to pay for this anymore. Even better. And again, most companies would have bailed out at that point. Like, oh my God, but they stayed the course. And of course, they were rewarded. Eventually, they got so much more growth as this became an industry standard that they had more than 10 times the traffic, more than 10 times the signups, more than compensated them for their loss of conversion rate. But the key is that they didn't calculate the ROI of this action. Because in business, the most important actions, the most important decisions a company will ever make are ROI negative by definition. Because when we do the right thing, we build up our trustworthiness, the costs of doing so are very tangible, but the rewards are intangible. So how can we possibly score? So every time someone shows up with a spreadsheet to stack rank by ROI, they make it impossible to do the right thing. That's kind of why our society is collapsing left and right. So now back to your question about communication. So this simple phrase, make a better internet, this simple commitment to be principled, these snappy, clear phrases allowed the whole company to reason about what the right thing to do was.